Before we get to today's episode, I want to give thanks to our sponsors. The first sponsor is the Monkey Mashup. There are so many parenting websites, but they all offer general advice or specialize in one area of parenting: pregnancy, breastfeeding. When you're feeling overwhelmed, you probably don't have the time or energy to spend hours on Google or social media to figure out how to get your baby to sleep or how to help your preschooler with separation anxiety. The Monkey Mashup is a space where struggling parents can find the exact help they need, whether it's uplifting articles, a licensed therapist, a baby sleep consultant, or a lactation consultant. You can search for all sorts of professionals available in your area or online, and even see whether they are available by phone, text, email, in-home visits, or virtual in the same search results, so you can find the exact right help for you. Visit themonkeymashup.com today and see how they can help. Again, themonkeymashup.com and see how they can help. Our second sponsor is offering an incredibly useful resource. Do you have a boy between the ages of 2 and 10 who is hurting you, your partner, or his siblings? Maybe he hits or kicks or teases or calls names? He is rigid and easily frustrated when things don't go his way, and you're likely tiptoeing around him or exploding, feeling like the mood of the entire family rests on his mood of the moment. It's a scary place to be, especially when you feel like you've tried everything from timeouts to talking nicely and nothing has helped. What if the aggression doesn't stop? With 2 decades of success helping parents, Tasha Shore is everyone's go-to expert for young boys struggling with aggression. In her course, Out with Aggression, a 6-week sprint to stop your boy's explosions and lift your parenting confidence, Tasha teaches you how to keep your cool as you implement a peaceful parenting practice that stops the aggression. Aggression almost never goes away on its own, but you can stop it using connection. No punishment, no shame, no harshness. But you've got to do it right. Go to parentingboyspeacefully.com/authentic now, or click the link in the show notes for a free first step towards bringing peace back into your home. Once again, go to parentingboyspeacefully.com/authentic for a free first step towards bringing peace back into your home. I am Anna Seawold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, the power of deep listening. I have a returning guest on the show who has become a friend, and this is her 4th appearance. Can you guess who she is? If you are a longtime listener, you may know her. Dr. Judith Ruskay Rabinor. She's a clinician, author, writing coach, speaker, and workshop leader. In addition to her New York City private psychotherapy practice, she offers remote consultations for writers, clinicians, and families. In fact, I have taken a couple of writing classes with her and have found them really beneficial. She has published dozens of articles for both the public and professionals and has authored 3 books: The Girl in the Red Boots, Making Peace with My Mother; A Starving Madness, Tales of Hunger, Hope, and Healing in Psychotherapy; and Befriending Your Ex After Divorce, Making Life Better for You, Your Kids, and yes, your ex. She specialized in the mother-daughter relationship and in eating disorders. She's a sought-after speaker and workshop leader, as I said before, and she speaks at national and international mental health conferences, runs workshops, and appears on podcasts. During our first interview, we talked about her memoir, The Girl in the Red Boots, Making Peace with My Mother. Her second time on the podcast was with another phenomenal guest, Hope Edelman, in episode 307, How Mother Loss Shapes Who We Become. Her third appearance was in episode 310, The Healing Power of Storytelling, with my friend Christy Lorisella, in which we talked about the power of stories and writing as a healing tool. Today's conversation is a wide-ranging one. We focused on the transformative power of deep listening, as well as went into other interesting areas, such as the importance of taking personal responsibility in relationships, particularly in the parent-child relationship, how we all have a need to be listened to, and healing happens once someone truly witnesses our experience and chooses to listen to us deeply, how we unconsciously repeat harmful patterns and what it takes to break those cycles, why therapists care so much about the past, how we build resilience, and so much more. Judy says that deep listening is an act of generosity. Please enjoy. Judy, welcome to the podcast again. We meet again, and I am so delighted. I want to begin by saying that I belong to a book club in my community. And when we first gathered to brainstorm different books, everybody had to throw in a book title. The first thing that came to my mind, and I'm a voracious reader, I do this podcast, I said, what am I going to suggest that is going to rock everyone's world and be a good book? And I said, guys, I have a suggestion. It's a memoir. And the moment I said it's about the mother-daughter relationship, everybody said, yep, let's put that on the list. And lo and behold, months went by, and whoever suggests a book in my book club has to lead the discussion. And of course, as a podcaster, I have a little more power. I know the authors. I said to myself, I'm going to surprise the book club people. I talk to authors all the time, and it's still, I get starstruck, right? Not as much as in the beginning, but for ordinary people to meet the author of the book is an incredible experience, life-changing. And so I reached out to you, you said yes, and I felt amazing. And you came to our book club, and it totally created this incredible experience for the people during that book club evening and afterwards. And I told you briefly, and I'm taking so long to get to the main point, that people started opening up and sharing. These are neighbors who live together, but such profound truths and things have been shared that I've been truly amazed. So welcome back, my dear, lovely Dr. Rabinor.
I am so happy to be here with you, Anna. I mean, I guess it's about 2 years that we know each other already, practically 2 years. I always love coming on the program with you because you are an amazing interviewer. Can I tell you one of the things that's most amazing about you?
Yes, please.
Well, number one, you thoroughly, at least with me, you thoroughly read my book. And I've gone on podcasts where people don't even read the book. They just read a couple of paragraphs. But second of all, you're just genuinely curious. And curiosity is something that improves every relationship. When we're genuinely take the time to be curious about somebody else, how they came to be a podcaster, how they came to be interested in the mother-daughter relationship, how they wrote a book. And so, I mean, I feel like I love my book and I come alive when I talk to you. It's your curiosity that makes me think, and I can't just give a lot of canned answers.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. And I love you because you're very approachable. You're very warm. I feel like you're not a podcast guest, but a relative or someone that I know from the past. You know, I'm not projecting any feelings from the past, but I do have that warm, familiar feeling when I'm speaking with you. And you don't have pretentious things. You know, there's this openness. And a few times we spoke on the phone, I'm like, wow, this is incredible, you know?
Well, I know recently we were talking about our own daughters. I mean, the mother-daughter relationship is never far off my radar. And I also have a daughter who's much older than your daughter, just like I'm older than you. And you were telling me something with your daughter, and it reminded me of the challenges of having teenagers. So now my daughter is 47 and she is a therapist. And I wish you the same blessing, because it's so wonderful to have a daughter who went into my field and we can talk the same language, and it's really great. But when you have a daughter who's a teenager, it's like not only are you speaking a different language, you're on a different planet, right? It's like being on a different planet some of the time.
Some of the time, for sure. Yeah. It's just amazing. I think I am very fascinated by human relationships in general and by the parent-child relationship specifically. It's a big interest of mine because it shapes us as children. We learn everything in the context of this relationship about ourselves, about the world, about human interactions in general. Then when we become adults, we have our own relationships with our parents, whether these parents are alive or dead. In my case, we still have relationships with them and we're still influenced by those relationships. So it's this interesting arc of human life. And just like any other relationship, this one is so fascinating for me, more fascinating than anything else.
That's why we get along, because we are in sync about this. You know, I've had many patients who have said to me, why are therapists always digging around in the past? Why do we have to open up that chapter again? I went over that. I'm done with that. I want to talk about what's going on now. And the answer to that question that you and I both so firmly believe is that the past is never dead. It's not even over. That we learn so much in our childhood environments, and we carry those ways of being into our current life. And for many people, that's a kind of toxic idea. They don't want to think. They don't want to acknowledge that childhood is such a powerful influence on us. But that is my perspective, and I know it's yours too.
It is. I was just speaking with a client right before I got on this call with you, and he is in a messy court situation. And what's required of him is to apologize to his children for the things that he has done and said, because there's a big rupture and court involved and things like that. And he's having a hard time. Number one, he doesn't want to apologize to his kids. He thinks, why should a parent apologize to his kids? And so when I was talking to him today, and I'm like, our parents rarely apologize to us, or maybe never did. But it's when we become humble and human and apologize for the things we've said or done, for the wrongdoings, we show personal responsibility. I said to him, the fact that you are unable to take that responsibility today is because your parents failed to show that to you. It's not your fault that you're stuck and you can't do this repair process. But it's a necessary one because first, you're breaking the cycle. Second, you're teaching your children how to repair and be human and apologize and be vulnerable and deepen your connection. Wonderful things are coming out of this. But that personal responsibility is a huge one, because when I work, and you can speak about this too, when I work with people, it's like, and that's a trauma sign, right? That it's this power, your sense of agency has been taken away from you. And as an adult, you're always trying to find fault in other people or blame other people, and you play the victim. And the moment you step into your power, then you start the healing process. I think it's one of the aspects of healing is to find that sense of agency in yourself and speak from your needs, from your feelings, and take responsibility for your actions and thoughts and feelings and behaviors. I mean, this is a lot again.
Well, it is a lot because, I mean, you've mentioned so many things that are core principles that really guide my work. One is the repair process. Like, people are all imperfect. We are all imperfect. Every parent makes mistakes. And I'd really be curious, like the client you're talking about, if we were to ask this client, did your mother ever do anything wrong? The answer, of course, is yes. Every parent does wrong. Did she ever apologize? Did your father ever do anything wrong? So often people grow up in a family and they unconsciously just repeat the same patterns over and over again. And I think that's what you mean by the cycle of trauma, that what was done often we then do.
Mm-hmm.
I have an example from the book that I wrote that I would love to talk about, because I mean, I know there's so many people listening to your podcast because you give such great ideas about how to be a better parent. The story I tell in the book is that one day that my mother did some very foolish things. Now that I'm older, I can think of them as foolish. These are things I held big grudges about. I mean, just to give one little example, when it was time for me to get my tonsils out, she told me I was going to a birthday party. So she gets me all dressed up in a new outfit, and we get in the car. And instead of going to the birthday party, we go to the hospital. Well, seriously, Anna, I mean, I was traumatized for years, and it was much more than a birthday party or the hospital. It's the issue of trust. And what bothered me more than anything was that my mother wouldn't take responsibility for it. She said, this is what the doctor said I should do. I believe that. I believe that's true. But what she didn't say is, I am so sorry. That those were the words I longed for. I'm so sorry. She was insistent on, you'll get over it. You got over it. You're fine. Everything, as long as you're fine in the end. And the truth is, I was fine in the end, but it hurt and it injured me. And it also, I think my children would say, I do apologize. But anyway, now that's good that I can say that. But once I was on the beach with my daughter, who's now 47, and my mother was there, and I wanted to take a walk with a friend because the friend wanted to tell me all about her life and what was going on. And my mother said, just sneak off. Just sneak off. Don't even say goodbye. Don't say goodbye. I'll take care of her. So I get down to the water's edge. I turn around, and my little daughter, who's 2.5 years old, is screaming, sitting on my mother's lap. I run back and I cuddle my daughter, and my mom said, I say to my mom, I shouldn't have done that. And my mom says, it's okay that you did it. That's what I used to do. Everybody, she'll get over it. I say, you did that? And well, how did I react? And she said, oh, you'd have a tantrum. I said, I would have a tantrum, and you're telling me I should do that to my daughter? She said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. She'll get over it. You wanted to talk to your friend. I was blown away. But upon reflection, I was not only blown away at my mother and that she gave me this stupid advice. I was blown away at myself. I was already a psychology graduate school student, learning about attachment, learning about the importance of trust. So I'm just saying, there I was thinking I was understanding things about trust and attachment and building a secure relationship. and I followed in my mother's footsteps. I followed in her
Understanding and knowing is a completely different thing. But if you had experienced that, if you had that felt experience of what it's like for my mom to mess up and apologize, you would have done differently. I think having this, knowledge is great, but it is through our experience that we live our life, right? Otherwise we would just all read books and gain information and be the best parents we can. I can tell my client, hey, yelling is not good at your children. Okay, let's stop the yelling. That doesn't work like that. It's through the experience. And again, you're talking about this personal responsibility. When your mom says to you, just sneak out, she tells you, you have a past not to take personal responsibility of talking to your daughter, facing your daughter, dealing with her feelings, speaking your truth with dignity, and communicating your need that I need to go, communicating clearly in this relationship because it's not valuable, this relationship, or kids are second class, or whatever the reason is, right? We don't know, but that is, she sort of enabled you not to take personal responsibility in that moment because she didn't see the value of it.
She didn't see the value of it. And I still ask myself as I tell you this story, well, why didn't I stand up to my mother? And that's because, I called that chapter in the book, Mother Knows Best. Like, we want to think that our parents knew what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We want to think that we had very wise and loving parents. And to recognize that our parent made a mistake sort of cracks that image. I mean, it just is important that everybody listening knows all parents make mistakes. All parents sometimes do the wrong thing. And the most important thing we can do is acknowledge it. Acknowledge that we did the wrong thing and apologize to whomever it was who got hurt. And that changes us. To say out loud, I made a mistake, is not that easy for someone, just like you started talking about a court case. And if the court wants this guy to apologize to his children, he probably did a lot of things that need an apology, right? This didn't float down from the sky.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, there is things and there is things, right? Some of us may yell at our kids. The rupture comes in different forms. You may say it's a spectrum, right? On one end of the spectrum, you may have just general, you say no to your kids, you set the limit and they don't like. Your child wants to stay up late at night playing video games. You say, no, you can't do that. There's a little rupture in your relationship, but then you repair, hopefully. That's sort of like a low level rupture. That is more frequently happens in parent-child dynamic. But then there is more toxic form of ruptures. When you lose your cool, you get triggered because of your traumatic past and you take it, you blow it out of proportion and you are not in control anymore. Your child does something ordinary, but your reactions are extraordinary. They don't match the proportion. They're disproportionate. And that talks about your own childhood. And that's where you need to take that personal responsibility and not blame your child for triggering you or making you feel a certain way. And say, oh, I'm not going to apologize to my kid because it was because of their behavior that I lost my cool. You see, you're still not taking that responsibility. Other people can do and say a lot of things, but for kids to hear their parents apologize with dignity, with vulnerability, it not only makes us human, but also teaches our children to take that responsibility for their own wrongdoings and mistakes and not feel shameful or disconnected from themselves, right? We don't want to portray we don't want to push it under the rug and not talk about things. That's going to fester and become even more toxic.
I mean, it's funny, we started out talking about the power of listening, and now we're talking about the power of an apology, and they're related, right?
They are, yes.
Because if we want our children to listen to us, we have to be authentic. And our children are, when kids are punished and they feel it's really unfair, a lot of resentment grows. And it's important for a parent to say, I punished you for something and I think I overreacted. I was just in a bad mood. I had a hard day at work. We're preparing our children. We're letting them know life is imperfect, and so are all of us. Each and every one of us is going to make mistakes. We're all fragile human beings, and we all hopefully do the best we can. Right.
Right. Yeah, we started before recording. You said that you think one of the biggest skills that any parent can cultivate or practice is deep listening. I think it's huge. It's such a fundamental skill. Why do you think so?
Well, because listening is, it's so many things. Deep listening is really like an act of generosity. It's like saying what you are doing matters. I'm right now staying with my grandchildren because my kids are away on a little vacation. And so sometimes they tell me things that are a little on the tedious side, a little on the boring side, but that doesn't matter. When you're 10 years old, that's how life is. And I say, tell me more, tell me more. I want to hear the whole conversation between you and your friend, you and the teacher, what happened. And I'm listening. And through the listening, I'm developing a relationship with this child. I'm listening. So I'm being respectful. I'm saying your world matters to me, and I can't understand you unless you really share, and I want to know. And so I'm not jumping in to talk about myself. I'm just listening. I'm saying, you matter. You matter, and I have the time for you. I'm even saying why listening is so important. I don't know all the answers to everything. You're 10 years old, but you may have answers for me. Why did that kid do that mean thing to you? Let's see if we can figure it out together. And I'm forming a relationship. And so often in conversation, somebody just can't wait to talk. When we listen, we show that we are learners. We're learners in every sense of the word. I want to understand what you're saying.
Yeah. You said something I loved in the beginning. You said it's an act of generosity. It is so true, right? You make yourself, you put all your agendas, everything aside, and you open yourself up to just receive this human being, be that your child or another person, and you just listen. And it can be so transformative. This is why people go to therapy, right? And heal.
This is why people go to therapy. And you made me think of another thing. When people fall in love, they're so generous with one another. They listen. You look at couples on like a first date, they're out talking, listening, smiling, connecting, making eye contact. You look at people often sitting at a table in a restaurant with their cell phones, you think, these people are not interested in each other. They're interested in themselves. They're checking on everything that's going to happen tomorrow. And it's amazing how that listening presence is part of what falling in love is. That somebody is really interested. They think you're adorable, witty, wise, funny, fun, and they're listening. And we all crave being listened to. And that is at the core. People talk about therapy. They call it the talking cure. It's not really the talking cure. It's the listening cure. It's being listened to. Would you agree?
I completely agree, because all we want from other humans is someone to witness our own inner experience. And I think that's what heals us. The therapist listens deeply, and you feel that somebody understood you and saw your experience in a non-judgmental way. And that's what's powerful. Not your talking, right? You can talk and talk and talk. Even to yourself, you can talk, but no one is listening. That's not going to heal.
And we've probably had the same experience that people come to us who've gone to other coaches, counselors, therapists, and they say, I didn't get anything out of it. I talked and I don't even know. I just talked about the same thing. And that brings me to another point, that asking questions is actually a form of active listening. Asking questions is, let me see if I understood what you just said, and repeating it back. Did I get it? Are you sure I got it? Because somebody goes on with a long story, you can get lost in the weeds. And that's really fine for just general conversation too. People who want to tell you every detail. I have a relative who still wants to tell me what's wrong with her husband's ex-wife. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. I have a relative who still wants to tell me what's wrong with her husband's ex-wife. He divorced that woman 20 years ago. I'm still hearing the same story. Why is she telling? What is it she's trying to communicate to me, right? And so if I interrupt her gently and nicely and say, I think I heard this story already, but I know you want to tell me something. What are you telling me? She's telling me that she's still suffering because of his terrible falling out with his ex-wife, and maybe the ex-wife turned the kids against him or did something that didn't sit right with her. But she's not getting to the point. She's just telling a long, tedious story that I've heard more than 2 or 3 times, right? So asking questions can be a wonderful way of being an active listener.
Yeah, and there are questions and questions, right? The question, it could be an open-ended question, or a question if it's more presumptuous, like I know where this is going, or I know the answer question is never good. I sometimes listen to other podcasts, and I think what makes my podcast more interesting, and people always compliment me as an interviewer, is because I genuinely care about people and their stories, and I listen and I'm curious. But I also ask, even though I may have a hunch or a suspicion where the author or person is going, I can't assume that I know the answer. I have to ask you, like, what do you think? What happened when this happened? Well, how did you come to that? Instead of saying, oh, you must have felt sad. I don't know. No, why am I framing it like that and putting you in that place for you to say, yes, confirming I felt sad? No. How did it feel for you? That's more open-ended than you can choose to share with me or not. But if I say, something presumptuous, or then that closes the conversation and it doesn't go deep. And the same is true with our kids, right?
I mean, what you're saying is so true. And I know lots of parents have difficulty making contact, especially with teenagers. How was school today? Fine, Ma. Bang, the door is shut.
Yeah.
And so parents say to me, well, what am I to do? And I say, what you're to do is you're to say, I'm your mom, and I want to know what's going on in your life, and we need some time. So you tell me when it's the right time. Is it right when you get home from school? Is it right before we have dinner, after we have dinner, before you go to bed? And then for a parent to really listen. And when you're faced with one-word answers, how was school? Fine. No, that's not good enough. You have to ask questions. You have to say, a lot of people like to say, what was the best thing that ever happened to you today? That's not my favorite question. My favorite question is, what is the hardest thing that happened to you today? I love that question.
Yeah.
Because that's what we really want support with. We don't need to just tell people, oh, Anna, I've had such a great day. This happened, that happened, this happened, that happened. It's what is the hardest thing that happened to you today? Well, I have a hard decision to make. Should I write an article for this magazine, or should I do something else? How do I weigh this? And just talking out loud and being listened to respectfully can be healing. I want to really repeat that, because I feel like everybody in the audience needs to know that sometimes when anybody, a kid, your partner, a husband or wife, a friend, your mother, is talking, you can help them heal themselves by just listening. And it is okay to ask questions. Like, a great question is to interrupt and say, let me just make sure I understand what's going on. And then you try to nudge them along if you think you're going to hear the same story that you've already heard. So what's bothering you about that? Can you tell me just take a moment. Take a moment and think, what is bothering you about that? And then people get to a deeper thing. I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake. I'm afraid I always make mistakes. I'm afraid I'm really stupid. I'm afraid I don't really have good judgment. I don't know what I really want. That's what you want to hear, as opposed to long story A versus long story B, right? You want to hear, what's really eating away at a person. Sometimes you find out by just being a good listener, by just listening to the details. And then you're able to sort of get underneath it to the real issues.
And oftentimes when people talk, they don't know what their problem is yet. I find that to be true about people and kids. We need to sort of...
I think we need to repeat that because it's such an important statement.
I think often when we bring up something, we don't know what our core problem is. We beat around the bush, we feel a certain way, we're frustrated at certain things and people. But when someone truly listens, you sort of excavate, you get to the crux of the problem that you have. You need to talk it through to know. And oftentimes it's not the face value problem. I find that people come and say, I'm dealing with anxiety, but that's not their real problem, right? When you talk, it's like, wow, this is the real issue. Or what did I ask my client yesterday? I asked her a question. I said, what are some self-care things you do for yourself? And she gave me a list. I said, are you sure these are self-care things? This sound more like needs that you want to meet these needs, right? So people often don't know what they're talking about, and kids are the same. So when we say to the kid, what's bothering you? What's the problem? Well, they don't know yet. They need to talk and share until together we figure out what the real problem is. Humans are the same way. I find like when I go and complain to my friend about a certain thing, it's never about that certain thing. It's a larger issue, but I need to talk and vent and someone listen and hold space so that we can get to the kernel of the problem, so that we can solve the problem. I find that often to be true. Like we never know what our exact or original problem is.
And also, I love the expression holding space.
Mm-hmm.
And you also used another expression, which is one of my favorites, which is witness. Like we love being witnessed, and we love it when somebody holds a space for us. And if you had a good enough childhood, there were times where you were really just held. You were held and rocked and comforted, and you felt comforted and safe just by the warmth, the emotional and physical warmth of somebody caring, cuddling you. And we need that throughout life. And a good conversation to me is like a warm bath. You look at a list of what you're supposed to do for yourself, and you're supposed to always take a warm bath. Well, I don't know about that.
So true. Everybody talks about self-care, take bubble baths. Who's ever in the history of like motherhood taken bubble baths, and how many times? I've never did. I don't know. I don't know why people say that, like a warm bath.
Right. Right. It's a metaphor, though, right? It's a metaphor. And to me, a good conversation is a warm bath. It's like when people meet on, on the internet, and what do they want? They want somebody to take long walks on the beach with. Well, most people in the world don't live near a beach. But we're really not talking about a long walk on the beach. We're talking about an image of intimacy, right? Like think of sunset and the ocean lapping and a couple walking along together, holding hands, a man and a woman, two women, two men, and they're just being present with one another, being present and witnessing. And that's what people want. It doesn't have to be a beach, right?
Yeah, so true. You also said the word details. I think listening in a way that you do pay attention to the details and not just to the general message, right? It's key. And listening with truly keen ears to hear the little intonations, the change in the tone of voice when people tell you something. I often, like when I interview people on the podcast, I'm very auditory. I listen carefully and the voice changes. Or with clients, my client today, I said, hey, how are you doing today? The way he responded, I knew there was something going on. But he said, fine, right? If I paid attention just to the words, I would have just taken it at face value and moved on. But no, I paid attention to how the sentence sort of went down and his voice got sunken. And I knew something is eating him up. And sure enough, And I didn't push with my agenda. I said, I noticed that your voice changed. And do you want to talk about it? And sure enough, he did. So I think it's important to pay attention to the details, to the tone of voice, and respond to that and open that up and comment, very directly comment to that.
I totally agree. And so for any parent listening, I mean, just saying to your child, I noticed you came home today and you looked a little glum, or you looked very excited. Did anything happen? Sometimes kids are reluctant to tell their parent even a good thing because they might be afraid the good thing is going to evaporate, right? They might be afraid this couldn't possibly happen. Is it really going to last? And they don't want to be disappointed. So it's important to just notice. And I love that word, notice. Just to notice what your kid is doing and say that, I noticed you didn't eat much for dinner. What's wrong? Could be a stomach ache, it could be a heartache, right? Could be a heartache. And sometimes people don't even know when they're having a heartache, when things have gone wrong. And it helps them, for somebody who loves them, to say, I notice you spoke differently. You look different. Your voice changed, right? Your eating habits seem different. Why are you picking at your dinner? You usually love chicken, tuna fish, whatever it is, right?
Yeah, it's so key. I think it's important for parents to so I will highlight this point, to notice and comment, and as opposed to saying, you're not eating your dinner. Why aren't you eating your dinner? I cooked the dinner. Like derailing completely. And
no dessert if you don't finish your dinner.
Yes. And it's like, wow, we not only failed to identify what's going on for the kid, we also made him or her feel bad. And it's so important. I think there's two words, notice and witness, right?
And we're talking about lost opportunities, right? That a kid not finishing their dinner is a lost opportunity to find out why. I mean, it's fine to say, no, you can't have dessert if you don't eat dinner, but it's more important to find out why they're not eating dinner, right? It's more important to find out what is going on, that all of a sudden your habits are changing. And a kid feels very important that somebody is noticing what they're doing.
Yeah, the nuances, they do feel like, wow, I matter. Somebody cares enough to know what's inside me that I'm not even showing. So they think they're not showing, right? I think it's important, but oftentimes parents make it about themselves. I cooked so hard. I slaved in the kitchen. You're not eating. Geez, this is not about the food. Like, as I said, like, it's never about the thing that we're presenting with. It's always deeper than that. And but for this to be able to notice, ask deeper questions, listen and witness, be witness to someone's experience, you have to have time. You have to be in a certain frame of mind. You have to slow it down. You have to be present, right? Present with yourself, and know that what you feel and think is yours, and not project and see your child's experience through that lens. I think it's another important step, because we often get flooded or triggered, or we make it about ourselves and take it away from the child's or another human's experience. You know, like, let me tell you what happened at that book club, right? I told you, because you wrote your book in such a self-disclosed and vulnerable, authentic manner, it allowed people to share from their childhoods, their relationships with their parents. And without giving a lot of detail, one of my neighbors shared something significant that shook everyone. Nobody knew. And she just opened up and she was able to be vulnerable and felt safe in this space. And she told me, I don't know, Anna, what are you doing? But you make me feel so safe that I want to share with you. And then they were, this was at the dinner. This is post book club. We had a dinner with almost the same group of people. And there are the six of us sitting and having dinner. Well, when this woman out of the blue shared her experience, a very tragic experience, I immediately stood up and I just held her in my arms and I started crying with her and just being with her like that, right? But what I observed in other women, it was completely expected. That's how humans are. One person changed the subject. She immediately said, whatever. And the other person says, wine, some more wine, anyone? Completely different, experience. They can't stay with the discomfort. The other person started talking about something that happened to them, their experience, some tragic thing. And I was just thinking to myself, wow, it is so interesting how none of these grown people can just bear witness to this woman's pain. This is not going to last forever. It's going to be maximum 10, 15 minutes. But can we just be and honor her pain? She shared, like, without adulterating this experience. Can we just bear witness to this? We're not going to change the subject, talk her out of it, say, oh, look at the bright side. This was like tragedy happened like 40 years ago or 30. But it's just humans are astonishing,
You're reminding me, I know in the beginning of this conversation before we went on the air, I was telling you something about 9/11. You remember?
Yes, yes.
This is an amazing fact that in Seattle, they had a memorial and they had set up 3 hours just to honor the people in the East who had been killed in 9/11. And they thought that it was going to last 3 hours, and it lasted 3 days. That's how many people came. And some journalists started interviewing people. Why are you here? Did you know people that were on those planes, that were in those buildings? Why are you here? And they found out that people had so many buried traumas that they had never mourned. And that's just what you're saying, that we live in a culture that doesn't really give a lot of room for mourning and grieving the bad things that have happened. And a bad thing can even be that you get picked on in 7th grade by a mean kid. That's a bad thing. It's not as bad as 9/11. We know that. But it's a bad thing. But we live in a culture where there's a big press for, let's just get on with it, like pass the wine. As a matter of fact, let's bury it with more wine. Right.
Yes, I was shocked when she said, some more wine, anyone? And I just wanted to say, are you kidding me? Like, can you wait? This is an important moment.
It's very important to bear witness to the small things that happen in people's lives that cause them pain and discomfort. And we all build resilience by being able to own the things that have happened. Some of the things that happen are just by chance, and some of them are actually our fault. And that's okay too. Like, as to get back to, we're all imperfect. We all sometimes do the wrong thing. And being able to talk about sad things and hard things. And everybody is not shooting the winning basket on the basketball team. Everybody is not going to Harvard. Everybody is going to get letters of rejection when they apply to college. Nobody gets into every college. And it's okay to mourn with them. People need company in mourning, right?
Absolutely, but I think it's a hard skill. I mean, we don't want to open up why it's hard for a lot of people, but based on the reactions those women offered, I could tell what kind of mothering they had received, probably, right? Isn't it indicative of their upbringing?
Yes, what kind of mothering they had received. And then that makes you really, think about, so what kind of mothers are they? Because one of my favorite things is, without hard work on ourselves, we are doomed to just repeat the past. And sometimes we don't even know what to work on. Now, so here's a guy, you started this talking about a client of yours who was told by the court to apologize to his children, and here's a man having trouble apologizing. We'd have to wonder why. Did he learn that, only jerks apologize? Or had he never received an apology? And what would happen to him if he apologized and his kids said, it's okay, Dad, it's okay? What would happen to him? What would he learn from that? And what didn't happen in his own childhood? What would get opened up? So it behooves all of us to really dig down deep and try to understand that the parenting we received the parents we want to be, the gap between, and to figure out what we need to do in order to be the parent we want to be. It's a tall order. It's probably, I know you and I say this every time I'm interviewed, it's the hardest job in the world.
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. And
Than being a psychologist or a podcaster, right?
yes, it is. It is hard. Being a podcaster is nice. I love it. It's I listen to people's stories. I learn, makes me a richer person, and I'm always in that warm bath every time I do the podcast.
I feel that way about being a therapist, and sometimes after a session is over, I think, wait a minute, did I miss something? And I'll make a note and I'll put it in my calendar and I'll say to the person, after you left, I thought about, you said this, and I didn't even ask you. So what did happen? So everybody makes mistakes. The podcaster makes mistakes. The psychologist makes mistakes. And I'm sure you've had moments where you refer back to another podcast and you remind the audience, we heard somebody say this and somebody say that. There are like some universal themes that get brought up on your podcast. And we can't always give the right answer, whether you're a podcaster, a psychologist, or a parent. We just don't always give the right answer. And that's okay, because there's always time to go back and say, hey guys, I forgot this. Right?
Yeah, I love that. Again, that talks about being humble, vulnerable enough, and taking responsibility and saying, hey, I made this minor mistake and I want to correct it. But if you feel like, why should I apologize? Why, if you're stuck in that kind of story in your mind, that's an opportunity for deepening the connection always when you come back and you say such thing.
That I specialized in eating disorders for most of my career. And that's one of the things that people who develop anorexia, they are perfectionists. They have an idea that they have to be perfect. Of course, nobody can be perfect. So since nobody can be perfect, I'm not saying all, but some people think I will have the perfect body. I will lose weight and I will have a perfect body. And they'll devote their whole life to it because it's one little simple, concrete activity that can completely absorb them. And of course, what they're doing is missing the whole point of life, that none of us can really be perfect. We don't need the perfect body. And we need to have generosity and compassion for ourselves and for each other. I think that's what both you and I, those are goals in both of our work. Our own work, and in our own work on ourselves. Like when we're yelling at somebody we love, we think, stop yelling, stop yelling.
Yeah. It's interesting how we started and how we're ending. So just to summarize and bring some major points home, what do you think? We talked about personal responsibility. We talked about grief and the importance of mourning.
And we talked
listening,
being a good listener, giving somebody an opportunity to talk about what went wrong. What went wrong is helping them heal. It's being able to stand with another person who's suffering. And just having a witness allows somebody to heal. And that's a very simple concept. That's a very simple concept, right? But it's one we hope everybody will think about. Just listening to your child is a gift. Listening to someone you love. Let's not be like the people in the restaurants only looking at their cell phones rather than the person they're having dinner with. Even though we've all gotten stuck in this electronic world that we live in, realizing we're neglecting who we're with because we're busy on the phone. It's crazy.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother conversation. But you also, if you've been with someone for a long time, you think you know them, and so there is nothing new to discover. So you brought an example in the beginning when people fall in love, they're so like listening, and because you are in that new phase of learning and discovering. And after a certain time, when you already discovered, quote unquote, everything you think, then you lose that curiosity. But I think it's an important reminder for all of us to bring that curiosity with us wherever we go, whether it's a podcast, a parent-child interaction, partner-partner, a therapist client, everywhere we go, having that curiosity guide us, because ultimately if you show interest in another person, notice and witness and listen, amazing things happen. People heal.
Curiosity makes our whole life so much richer. It means even if you've done it 20 times, the 21st time you can notice something different.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing. I am always curious about you. You always fascinate me. There's so many layers to you. As an older person, as a wise older woman, I look out at you, and you are a good role model for me. And I'm truly fascinated by who you are, the multifaceted person that you are, and an amazing person, mother. You just have so many interesting layers. Every time I talk to you, you're always curious and open, and you learn new things. You're not one of those people who is done growing, and that's what fascinates me about you. And I want to always connect to you and get that energy. It's like I'm drinking from the same water fountain.
But I feel that way about you, because being a podcaster, you have a natural gift for this, but you also put in the work. You read the books, you find the authors, you do your homework. It's not all just natural. It's not just intuition. It's intuition plus hard work. So I love that you do that, and I love listening to your podcasts.
Well, all the best to you, Judy. I love you. I send you warm hugs to you.
And let's say Happy Mother's Day to everybody out there. It's such a gift to be a mother, and it's such an important role and part of both of our lives. And so Happy Mother's Day to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy Mother's Day to you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. What is your biggest takeaway from this episode? What resonated with you? How can you apply what you gleaned from this episode into your own life? I always love hearing from you. I welcome your feedback, comments, and questions. You can send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. You can call the number, and yes, I do prefer audio messages, to the number 732-763-2576. And for international listeners, there is a free tool on the contact page of my website called SpeakPipe. Go to authenticparenting.com/contact and leave me a message. If you want to connect with your fellow listeners from around the world, engage in meaningful conversations about the show, get support and answers to your parenting questions, join the Authentic Parenting community on Facebook, a private support group for parents like you. Support the podcast. If you enjoy this show and you find benefit in it, you can support the podcast in a few ways. Number one, you can rate and leave a review on the platform that you listen to. Number two, you can make a one-time donation in any amount that your heart desires. And number three, you can become a monthly patron on patreon.com. There are many levels of support. You can choose one that speaks to you. And know that your contribution makes a big difference. A lot goes into producing this podcast, and your support is truly valuable. Join other active members who believe and support the work of Authentic Parenting. Find the show wherever podcasts are played: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and elsewhere. And finally, if you know what I'm up to in my private life, see behind the scenes of podcasting, get inspiration, and just stay connected, follow me on Instagram, the only social media platform that I use. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seawald. Thank you so much for listening.